Tangerine is a brilliant, beautifully designed new magazine from Belfast, and the editors were kind enough to invite Banshee up to Belfast in June for the Belfast Book Festival, so we said we'd return the favour and have them down to Cork, so we're delighted to have them with us. So this afternoon we'll have 2 readings from Banshee and 2 from the Tangerine. I'll introduce the first 2, and then Mick from the Tangerine will come up and introduce the next 2 readers. And just so you know, my colleague Laura is manning the wine table over there. There's magazines for sale, so do help yourself. Our first reader is Niamh Campbell. Niamh is from Dublin and was a recipient of the Arts Council's Next Generation Literary Bursary in 2016. She's working on a novel, and her work is forthcoming in The Penny Dreadful and Gorse. At present, she's an Irish Research Council postdoctoral fellow at NUI Maynooth. And after Niamh, we'll have Laura McKenna. Laura is completing a novel for a creative writing PhD at UCC. Recent short fiction has been published in the Litro Anthology and Southword. A past Hennessy Award and Forward Prize nominee, she was longlisted in 2016 for the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize and the Bath Novel Award. So please welcome Niamh Campbell.
Thank you very much. I didn't realise the editor was going to be here, so I hope you don't think that was a bit fresh of me. I just need to say I was forthcoming in something to look like a professional. So sorry about that. Okay, this story is called Pro-Choice Supper Club. I knew Claire Bright at school, where she became known for a near unthinkable transgression. Her name is like the sharp, cold sucker of sunlight in springtime, isn't it? Ours was a convent school. Music was taught in the old dormitory in a large room facing a nun's walk and the sea that would be racked in high weather. Suddenly during class, rain would be lashed against the long loose panes like gravel, or trapped air would pipe in the chimney flue, or wind would travel down the flue and push against the piece of plywood sealing it. It would cause the wedged plywood to squeak against the frame of the fireplace. On the walls were amateur paintings of a jazz quartet, different musical instruments, and crooked screens of musical notes. From the windows, you could see the grey bank of the sea, but of course every desk and chair faced the other way, taking in 2 blackboards with faded notation lines. In this room, there was always an inoffensive odour of decay and candle wax like the air inside a church, until a foul note suggesting something very intimate began to develop when I was, I suppose, 14 or 15, when music class was still compulsory. The smell was at first gourmand, deep and rich like chocolate or perhaps like red meat. Some girls had begun by then to give off adult odours of various hues. At one end, a thoughtless, horsey cornstarch, metabolic sort of smell, but at the other end, rank BO, and in between, the sebum of our scalps, the cheese and onion of our junk nursery food, the urinary note of cigarette smoke, the old banana glow kinked through with sugared disinfectant issuing from week-old sanitary bins. To begin with, the smell in the music room was interesting. Redolent of fruit and fermentation, but it became, day to day and week to week, something unspeakable, and all the more so for being familiar to us. It aged from lunchbox mould to bachelors at mass, through garam masala and ammonia, coming to rust and the shellfish packing plant, until at last somebody discovered a bloody tampon inserted behind one of the notice boards and drew it out and saw just what it was and shrieked. I don't know how I heard that it had been deposited by Claire Bright, but within a short space of time, this was the rumour we all believed. She was the kind of girl you would believe it of. She was visibly troubled, having eyes that slid sinisterly from side to side in her head, and coarse black hair in a bowl cut. She said strange, prophetic-sounding things and read large science fiction novels. She did not have many friends. Neither did I, because I was by then already bored of everything, but the only means I had of expressing this were petulance and lamentation. I don't think anyone noticed me at school, but they certainly noticed Claire Bright. We said, she's a lesbian. We said, she's a Satanist. I think how darkly compelling it is to picture the schoolgirl with her coltish thighs extracting a swab of cystic tissue and new blood, gummed clots, water-thin hemorrhages, and stowing this as what? A curse? A hex? A rebellion? To have a vaginal channel wide enough for tampons at 15 is itself unusual and obscene. She seems to me like a kind of midnight horse or symbol. We were thrilled and declaimed her, but we wished, I know, that we had done it ourselves. I don't know now if Claire Bright really did this thing. I think she would have been expelled if it was traced to her, don't you think? Perhaps she was expelled and I've forgotten it. I know that many years later I was walking down the long traffic island in front of the General Post Office on O'Connell Street, putting flyers into the hands of assembled protesters, women chatting and eating ice creams and setting up tripods and unfurling large banners, when I looked into a white face with deep-set eyes and heavy black hair worn in a Chinese shiny bob, and I recognised it as the face of Claire Bright. This recognition did not hit me at once. We smiled at one another on a mutual impulse of recognition, and further down the traffic island, where I was still handing out flyers mechanically and saying, steering group meeting, repeatedly, I remembered her name, I remembered the tampon. I realised that I had never seen that tampon, nor been told conclusively that she had been involved. The story made me laugh now, but also it seemed somewhat disloyal or unsisterly of me to tell anybody. During the parade, I remarked to one of my companions, I know that girl, I knew her at school. She responded, Claire Bright, just as I said Claire Bright, and added, she's an artist. She has a studio in Pimlico. These days, it is easy to find out whatever you like about a person. But it was not until later again that we actually met. She said, yes, I remember you. She put her hands over her face in a grotesque of despair and moaned, oh God, that school. This was at a musical fundraiser in a basement social space on a summer night. Claire Bright played keyboard for a girl who set Natalie Barney passages to music. There was only a dark day dripping with banners to play on and some salvaged church benches for the audience, and most of us sat with our jackets bunched on the concrete drinking from cans. Afterwards, Claire included me in a conversation with a group of girls all drinking cider, lotus-legged, as the night got on and the air grew crisp and the man who rented the social space began running people, and at this point someone said, let's go to the studio, and it became apparent that they were referring to her studio. It was a night alive with city trees and buddleia, the canal coarsely fragrant, the white ghost bike bracketed to a bridge festooned with fairy lights and memorial photographs. I felt well and happy for the first time that I had come back to Dublin. In my life, and despite the convent, I have always found it difficult to make friends with women. It had been many years since I'd seen the ghost bike. I drifted my hand over the white saddle and leaned in to look at the photographs, waiting for those stragglers in the singing, drinking group to catch up and climb from the towpath, but the photos were blurred. As I was doing this, I was suddenly delivered back to a dream I'd had some nights before of a tree, decorated with trinkets and medals and lights, a large tree in the garden of the grand house that belonged to my lover's wife. A great number of my dreams involve parties or festive events, and I am often lost or anomalous, like a 13th fairy in these dreams, and this was no exception. My lover's wife, a willowy, beautiful woman with a brittle English voice, had been guiding me and some other women around the house and showing us things, holding a flute of liquor in her hand. There were fireworks and many lights everywhere, trestle tables of punch bowls, I suppose, but the point or the prick or the punctum of the dream was a given trinket on the tree that revealed itself to be a little locket photograph of me, taken when I was a child, that I happen to know in reality belongs to my mother. By the idle logic of the dream, I understood this to indicate my lover's wife or family had somehow known me as a child, and I felt compromised and thrilled by this. By now the canal stragglers had caught up. We crossed the street like scattered straws and climbed the stairs to an attic overlooking the water. While I half knew some people, most were strangers to me, which made me glad that I was drunk and tightly high. It was the women and girls, the floating crowd, the frail hysteria which had made me think of the dream. Now in the attic, people pulled cushions out and lit roll-up cigarettes, gasped into cans, opened a window pane to make a vaulting gesture to the sky. There were severe stars, more than was typical for the city, and a half-moon. Some people had bought chips. Some were men. Do you remember much about school? Claire Bright asked me. Not much at all, really. We left years ago. I have a sister there still. She folded herself leggily into lotus at my side. I could tell that several girls in the group were impatient to get her attention and that she was popular. The last thing I wanted to talk about was school. I've seen your art online, I told Claire. It's brilliant. Oh God, she said. What I'm working on now, it's killing me. A man with red hair lay on his back on the floor with a cigarette cocked in his hand and began to sing, baldly and humorously, "Come with me and I'll treat you decent, I'll stand you drunk and fill up your cannon." One girl sang a protest song in a quiet voice. When a person sang, they closed their eyes and were alone in the moment, but also a part of the room and the listening ring. I thought of my childhood and the kitchen chairs dragged up against the wall to leave the linoleum clear, the adults singing long, dolorous songs together at the end of the night. The only song I could perform was Henry Lee, and as I did, I heard my voice issuing smokily and jazzier than it had when I was a child, and feeling liquidly delicious in my throat. Afterwards, I was happy and arrogant. When the time came to leave in the early morning, Claire Bright announced that her latest project was a deck of bespoke tarot cards, and drew a card for each of us before we went. Mine was hand-drawn in charcoal and looked like the shroud of Turin. "Ah," she intoned deeply, "you will spend 6 weeks without makeup. You will become more confident with clearer skin." I laughed and replied that this would be no trouble for me. Thank you.
Hello. This story that I'm about to read actually came from one of the workshops here about 2 or 3 years ago, so it's quite nice to be reading it here after that. It's called Eerie. Imagine a tower, not the ancient castellated towers of fairy tales. This one is 60 floors high, a steel and glass installation, and at the top, you might call it a penthouse, a girl sits gazing out her window. The girl is young. Let us imagine she is 17, perhaps 18. Her pale face is veiled by a fall of long blonde hair. She sits alone. The room is white, as smooth and polished as an empty clamshell. Glazed marble floor tiles offer a shadowy reflection of the chrome and leather sofas, which pose awkward and empty at right angles to each other. 2 ordered stacks of glossy magazines stand guard at either end of a coffee table. The girl is not looking at these. She is seated on a low white bench, staring through the window. A low cloud wraps itself around the building like a tourniquet, cutting off the higher floors from the world below. Looking out, she can see several other towers like her own in the distance, rising out of the grey swirl. Sometimes she tries to imagine what goes on behind those barriers of reflective glass, but all she can think of is a mirror image of her own existence. A girl, a pale thing, all angles and shadow, a bleached bird's bones. Somewhere, a door opens, closes with a soft gasp. The girl waits. Heels clack on the tiles in the room next to her. Click, clack. The girl waits. A bell rings once, twice, 3 times. The girl rises in a staccato motion, walks to the kitchen barefoot on marionette limbs, and sits at the table. 2 places have been laid, 2 sets of silver cutlery, 2 crystal glasses, and 1 large egg timer. The kitchen is white, high gloss, and today it seems too bright. It hurts the girl's eyes. A woman, her mother, perhaps her stepmother. No, that's too cliched. Her guardian, then, is busy at the counter. What does this woman look like? She is a counterpoint to the girl. Her hair is black, cut in a sharp bob. She wears a black tailored jacket nipped at the waist, narrow pencil skirt and stiletto heels. She places 2 plates on the table, knocking her large onyx ring on the glass top with a loud rap. A hissed intake of breath accompanies the sound. The girl looks down. 2 parallel stalks of etiolated celery accompany a poached fish, head removed, which lies damply on the plate. The woman nods to the girl and turns the egg timer over. They eat. In the silence, the girl can hear the sands running, sense the fall of grain upon grain. As her tongue works over the thin flesh of the fish, she counts silently. 1, 2, 3 on the left side of her mouth, then 1, 2, 3 on the right. She eyes the timer, feels again the slide of grains, the soft heaping at the base of the glass. Where does she feel this? Somewhere at the base of her throat. The silence is broken by the woman eating the celery, her teeth sharp and white, crunching through corrugated stems like a crimping scissors on fabric. The girl follows suit. The last of the sands slide through the narrow gap in the timer just as they finished the meal. The woman smiles now, shows her teeth behind narrow lips. Good, she tells the girl, that was good. The girl waits. She knows what is coming. She will be told how all of this is for her own good. All of what, she wonders. She will hear how the world outside is a place of excess. Excess of what, she can't imagine. It is better, the woman tells her, better to stay as she is, safer. She pats the girl on her shoulder where her scapulae wing out through her pale cotton top. She weighs her, smiling as the needle on the scales limps and stutters before falling back again. At night the girl dreams. She dreams in colour, colours she doesn't understand. They are loud and insistent. Sometimes they pulse deeply through her, these shades of danger. Other times they fizzle inside, little darts running along her limbs. Sometimes the girl stares at her hands, holds them up to the window to let the light shine through them. She can just make out a thin web of lines, random circuits zigzagging beneath her skin. Her hands are smooth, unlike her body. Along the knotted rope of her spine, around the cage of her chest and over her arms, a dust of fine hair glows softly like a just hatched chick. Although the apartment is warm, the girl feels cold. Some days, when she moves through the rooms, she listens to her body, hears the discordant notes playing along her bones and joints like a dull wind chime. One morning she hears a different sound, a tapping, beak on glass. A bird is perched on the windowsill outside. How did he get here, this dark creature with sun-gleamed head of greenish blue? She has only ever seen the distant glide of wings far below, but this bird turns his bright eye on her, bends to retrieve something from the ledge. Her hand trembles as she struggles to open the window. He flutters inside, bringing a whisper of the outside with him. His leathered feet bracelet her narrow wrist as he drops an egg onto her lap, and then he's gone in a fan of feathers. The girl lifts the egg in her hand. Sunlight catches it and picks out the earthy green and ochre speckles on the glazed blue shell. She sighs at the beauty of it, at its smoothness as it sits warmly in her palm. The colours are like a soft voice, an endearment. She puts the egg to her ear and hears a call to her. Pressing her two thumbs against the shell, she senses its yield and cracks the egg open, her breath catching at the flash of gold within. She leans over it and dips her tongue into the glistening pool. At first she laps it, flicking the viscous glare, before putting the egg to her mouth, tipping it back, feeling the yolky centre slip down her throat. She licks her lips. Imagine now the bird returns the next day and the next, time and again. He brings an egg on each occasion. The girl leaves the window ajar. She is ready, waiting greedily, hand outstretched. He drops his gifts, shells of fawn-speckled dun or moss green flecked with rust, buttery shells stippled cream, an eagle's egg in brindled copper, a pure blue robin's egg, a swan's pale egg, veined in grey. She eats without thought, but her senses, they are sparking. The woman notices a change in the girl, a softening of her angles, a lifting of shadows. She shakes her head. At dinner, she gives the girl just one stalk of celery on her plate, one poached chicken breast. The woman points to the timer, but the girl has become careless and finishes her meal long before the sands run through. Weeks pass. The colour pink suffuses the girl's plumping lips, her blooming cheeks. It does not go unnoticed. There is something wrong, the woman declares. The girl must be weighed. The needle on the scales wavers, then plunges forward, resolute in its search for giddy numbers. The girl smiles. Is that a dimple in her cheek? Lines pucker the woman's forehead. One night the girl's dreams open up, petals folding back and scarlet furls scattering crimson seeds. She feels a deep ache low in her pelvis, a relentless grinding of cogs, clicking, ticking, shifting. She struggles to wake, but falls back into the wave of sleep, pulled under by the lure of colour, its siren call. Dawn brings its own repertoire of shades, chorusing in a spill of citrus light that wakes the girl. Something feels different. Her sheets are damp, more than that. The white sheets are wet, stained deep red. Her thighs are slick with warm red. Red what? How is it her dreams are here in the stinging light of day? Why is she unafraid? Her hands run over the sheets, lingers on the wetness with its smell of rust. She looks at her stained fingers and traces them down her arms, leaving trails of bloodied concentric spirals. In the living room, Dawn has shifted register and is chorusing shades of watermelon red. The girl walks barefoot on the blushing tiles to stand by the window. At this hour, the cloud is stretched thin enough to make out movement far below. She reaches for the handle, pushes hard. The woman wakes to a sound, a rhythmic whoosh and thrum, fading now. Something is different. She sniffs the air, the outside, it's in. Rising from her bed, she passes a mirror, frowns at her pleated mouth, relaxes her frown. In the living room, a faint breeze ripples the curtains, the window open. She brushes a white feather off the ledge. Her frown returns as she pulls the handle toward her, locks it into place. As she calls for the girl, she wipes her hand on her nightdress, vaguely aware of an unfamiliar stickiness. Even before she reaches the girl's room, she senses her aloneness. The door is open. What does she see? Imagine now, dawn has departed, reeled back its colours. The room is filled with harsh waves of white light, cacophonous notes which shriek in her ear. The bed is an abandoned eyrie of heaped blood-stained sheets, the floor underneath a mosaic of scattered eggshells. The woman's mouth on pleats widens into a red scream. She swings back from the doorway, back to the living room, back to the window. Her hand reaches for the handle once again. Once again, she registers the sticky sensation on her palm. She looks out. Cloud hugs the building, obscuring the world below. Above the cloud line, she can just make out a bird, a swan, she thinks, flying beyond the distant buildings.
Hello. I just want to firstly thank Emer Ryan and the Banshee crowd for inviting us down and organising this event. It's really lovely to be here. We've brought two short story writers, Darragh McCausland and Louise Kennedy, both of whom have been published in issue 2, which is available in the corner next to the wine. I'll just go straight to introducing both of them. Darragh McCausland's work has been published in the Dublin Review, Gorse, Stonecutter and Lighthouse. His story that he's going to read today, Felon from Galway, tells the story of a couple of young boys getting involved with a Ouija board. It's a very endearing, very funny story, also quite macabre. As much about childhood and the friendship between these two boys as it is about the weird supernatural occurrences they come up against. And then Louise Kennedy, who's going to read first. She's been published in The Stinging Fly, Ambit, Wasafiri, and has won several short story competitions. She's currently studying a creative writing PhD at Queen's University, Belfast. Her story, Hunger, follows a young girl whose family have moved from north to south of the border during the height of the Troubles around the death of Bobby Sands. It's a short, intense, and evocative story that really touches on the feeling of political and social dislocation that the girl and her family are confronted with. So please welcome Louise Kennedy.
Hunger. I throw my bike against a lamppost and take the steps of the town hall 2 at a time. The condolence book looks too heavy for the table it rests on, a desk with chair attached from a classroom. A placard is propped nearby, asking the mild folk who are beginning to move through this Midland town to support the hunger strikers. Che McGar is struggling to pin a crude black and white image of Bobby Sands to the front of the desk. A charge of early summer wind wraps it around his narrow hips. Che used to stand outside Mass selling month-old copies of the Morning Star. I don't know where to look and wait until he has subdued the poster before taking the pen, one of those yellow biros that won't write unless you carve deep scores into the paper. Che McGar's face is a breath from mine, and this close I can see that his hair is thinning and he doesn't look remotely like Adam Ant. I bend to the blank page. I etch my sympathies onto the paper in pseudo-Celtic handwriting I've copied from a Jim Fitzpatrick poster. I hand the pen back. "Chucky our law, chicken," says Che. "Our day will come." I run down the steps and grab my bike. In the window of Gogan's Hardware, there's a tabby cat supine on a mat printed with the face of John Paul II. It opens a green eye at me as I pedal home for breakfast. My mother has been up since 6. She's standing at the ironing board beside a 3-foot-high pile of wrinkled clothes, scratching at the taut skin on her belly. She's 9 months and 17 days pregnant. Her housekeeping has taken on a demonic quality. The pregnancy books call it nesting. I don't know what I'm going to call it. It's probably another girl anyway, she says. She nods at a box of bran flakes, but I pat my stomach as if I'm full. I've smoked 3 cigarettes and I feel sick. But what's wrong with the name Bobby? Dad's grandfather was called Bobby, and you loved the Bobby Kennedy who got shot, I say. Jesus Christ, can I get through the delivery first? My mother says. She leans on the edge of the kitchen table and waves my granny's cigarette smoke out of her face. The poor wee fella, all the same, my granny says. Don't encourage her, my mother says, stretching her arms above her head. I try again. You can still call it Bobby if it's a girl. Bobby McGee was a girl. This might work. Me and Bobby McGee is my father's favourite song. Somewhere miscellaneous, I let her slip away, he sings at family parties. I haven't the heart to tell him the line is somewhere near Salinas. Thatcher's a bad article. She even abolished the free school milk, my granny says. I was the only person at the town hall. Nobody down here cares, I say. Where we lived in the north, nobody cares either. We're not from Ballybloody Murphy, says my mother. Go to school. I can't argue. The pretty north downtown we left 2 years ago is unlikely to be waking to the clanging of bin lids. Language, says my granny. She fills the kettle, and while her back is turned, I take a gasp from the sopping cigarette she left in the ashtray. I go to school. My day has come. I'm the only northerner in the building, and everyone wants to talk to me. My English teacher says that at least the hunger strikers have the courage of their convictions, even if this IRA is nothing like the old IRA. The only difference, sir, is that you lot down here got your crappy free state and left us as second-class citizens under a thinly veiled form of apartheid, I say. He gives me a warning. At break time, a girl I don't know very well from the year above pauses in front of me. She's holding a pink Cadbury snack bar, 2 bags of cheese and onion potatoes, and a packet of Silvermints. The Silvermints will have their work cut out. Hi, Attracta, I say. I wish the rest of you murdering northern bastards would ever starve yourselves to death as well, she says. After school, I climb the steps again and lean over the condolence book. There are about 20 signatures now. Che McGar's handwriting is even more elaborate than mine. Jim the carpenter, who never finished building our garden shed, has signed his name. My father says that Jim is an armchair Republican and a work-shy Burke, but he underestimates him. In a few months, the guards will stop a car near the Curragh, and Jim will open the passenger door and come out with his hands up and a gun in his pocket. Elmer Fudd, Hong Kong Phooey, and Deputy Dog have signed their names as well. Che McGar tells me that nature is calling and slinks into Mallin's pub, leaving me in charge of the book. I sit in the chair and watch it pitch and tap and tug at the wrapper of a spice burger. After 15 minutes, Che still hasn't come back. I look at my own entry again. Ireland on free will never be at peace. I love you, Bobby Sands, I've written. I feel ridiculous. A truck full of sheep spatters the town's only pedestrian crossing with hot, terrified shit, and again I take the town hall steps, the poster snapping behind me. I pedal home as fast as I can. My sisters are doing their homework at the dinner table. My granny is fully dressed and not in her usual daytime ensemble of velour tracksuit, unfastened bra and quilted dressing gown. I run into the kitchen to look for my mother, to tell her I don't belong here, that I want to go home, but she's gone. My father has driven her to hospital. At 3 a.m. on the morning of May the 6th, 1981, 23 hours after the death of Bobby Sands, my mother gives birth to a baby boy. They name him John.
Thanks, Mick. It's a privilege to be in such a beautiful journal as the Tangerine. I'm just going to start kind of in the middle of the story and read a bit for the allotted time. There was a nip in the weather that afternoon, and a sharp autumn wind irritated the sty in my right eye. Jodie's blonde fringe, which was combed down on one side so he looked like John Connor in his adored Terminator 2, blew about over a half smile that unsettled me. They were definitely going to do it, he said. They were his sister Donna and a friend of hers who, like Jodie, were taking advantage of a free house because their parents, he boasted to me, were being entertained by a famous horse trainer in his mansion near Athlone. Oh, cool. I couldn't say no to him. My personality was completely dominated by his and always had been from the very first game we played when he powered a plastic replica of the A-Team's magnificent van through my feeble barricade of He-Man figures. We'll meet at the danger tree at 7, he said. At home that evening, I could not eat my dinner. Breathing deep circular breaths to quell my nausea, I watched its brown remains slide from my plate into the kitchen bin. Look at you, what's the fucking matter with you? My mother said, her eyes rising from the long, white, thin thing that trailed from a crochet needle to the floor. I found him waiting at the tree, a lone ash in the fields behind the estates. The tree was near death due to the deciduous ivy that during winter could be seen coiled like endless muscular grey arms around its collapsed trunk, suffocating it. He was wearing one of those long army coats with little German flags on the shoulders. It had a great black stain running down the side of it, a blob with tendrils. I was jealous of that blob, the slovenly cool of it. I had almost applied some of my father's Castrol GTX to my own coat in the sawdust darkness of the garage, but fear of the pipe stopped me. Fear of the pipe and its fine whistle, an almost human whistle that sounded if it was swung hard enough. I whistled myself, a reedy note between my top teeth, as I drew closer to Jodie and sensed the beginnings of the peculiar intimacy that always marked our time together. It was a very potent and condensed sensation. It was so strong, this sensation, that I temporarily forgot almost everything else. His presence loomed up and blocked out the world. Did you hear about the Satanism house? He asked. The word Satanism had its usual effect on me. It went through me like a current, stiffening the fur on my arms and the nape of my neck. I had grown up with a big imagination in not so much a holy, but a superstitious household, and I am, frightened of that figure, of Satan. Jodie was different. Maybe it was something to do with our respective upbringings, but to him the figure was nothing more than a character, a representation. I guess evil in the abstract was the least of his worries. No, I haven't heard of it, I said. He motioned by angling his head that we should begin the short walk to his. I followed obediently, feeling panicky as he continued to talk about the house, his voice jingling with a merry trill like bells on a stick. Well, it's more you'd call it a Satanism room. Benny Binlid and his brothers found it inside the empty house behind the Gout Hall. The one we tried to get inside. I had stood reluctantly in the front garden of the house, which was covered in pale boards rotting off their nails, while Jodie jimmied a metal bar into a decomposing plank with the word knackers sprayed on it. A crawling car had cut our task short, beeping its horn and flashing its lights. I'll never forget the face behind the wheel, deathly and slender, how it regarded us as we ran. The Binlids are some crew, but didn't I tell you they were doing seances in those places, didn't I? First was the kiddie fiddler, now it's seances. Didn't I tell you, didn't I? Indeed you did, I said. Hey, fishwife, I thought you loved to talk about that sort of stuff. Come on, you love it. He popped his lips like a landed fish gasping for air. His older sister had recently bestowed the nickname on me on account of my interest in local scandal, a trait that had more than once dropped me in hot water with the Burkes, whose house was a zone of secrecy and ways. I zipped my snorkel jacket in front of my mute face so I could ward off some of the evening's groping atmosphere with the warm smell of Lynx Africa, for I was a boy who liked to encase himself in things, crawl into holes, make my body small. When Packy Bonner saved the penalty in World Cup Italian 90, I only knew about it because I could hear the shouts spill out onto the street, muffled through metal, as I was encased in the hollow of a small cement mixer that had lain idle for 4 years on a building site near my house. Curled up like a fetus, smiling to myself because every human being was indoors watching telly, and nobody could possibly know about me, hugging my knees and my steel egg. What a feeling that was. They found a small door in the wall as well, said Jodie. It was a special door made for the seance, too small for a human to go through. I think you're talking shite, I said, unable to hide the dismal fright conjured by the image of the tiny door. No, you don't, he said in a rough but handsome voice. His eyes turned slowly into slits. We walked much of the rest of the way without talking. I kept upwind of him so that I would not have to smell his breath, which was always bad, although I would gladly put up with that breath in school if it meant having him whisper brilliant jokes in my ear during class, a dream denied by the teachers who deliberately kept us apart. Things scraped around our feet as we went, dead leaves in a tato bag. As at any time I was in company, I mostly saw the ground, a speckled grey conveyor belt passing between my runners. I still have dreams about the ground passing between my feet, dreams of picking. In these dreams, coins appear in it, and I pick them up and put them in a cloth bag. I am always that age again. It wasn't until we passed through Jodie's front gate that he spoke, invoking the very presence I was trying to evade in my thoughts. The figure that connected everything that day, from the white thing hanging off my mother's crochet needle to the funny smell in the air that evening, salt rot, a smell that did not belong to the estate. I guarantee you it's something to do with Phelim from Galway, he said. Rising through the centre of the playground lore that had quickly grown around the Ouija board craze was a spirit called Phelim from Galway. Phelim, we told each other, first appeared at a Ouija board game in one of the two houses at the top of the town. He told those girls that he was a fisheries worker from Galway. He was soaking wet, the girls told their friends afterwards, and he had no stomach. You could see right through him. He told the girls that he was wet, eternally wet. It was his damnation, and he came as a disciple of Satan. Before he left, he goosed one of the girls. His last words to them were that he needed sex. He appeared again since, or so it was relayed on the playground grapevine, to a girl doing an Ouija board on her own. The next day at school, they said, she crawled into the space between the stationery cupboard and the ceiling in order to escape an invisible pinching hand. It was a very small space, and she bent in an unnatural way to get into it, which she would not have been able to do were she not so thin and bendy. A priest had to coax her down. As I shuffled up to Jodie's front door and into his personal space, I wished that he had never brought Phelim up. The horny ghoul felt too close. I wished I was in my bed instead, with my feet drawn up beneath me as I read one of the Ramsey Campbell novels I had on loan from Athlone Library. Ah, Ramsey, you I could control. I could close your book at will.
Thanks, Darragh. Thanks to all of our brilliant readers today, Niamh Campbell, Laura McKenna, Louise Kennedy and Darragh McCausland.